Last week, cell phone footage of a Clark County School District police officer was obtained by News 3, and it shows an officer confronting a student and violently forcing that student onto the ground. The incident took place at Durango High School, and it followed an investigation into a firearm being reported near the school. Now, the video has sparked plenty of protests as well as criticism from the NAACP and other organizations, and also calls for that officer to be fired. So, what are the legal rights of students when it comes to interaction with Clark County School District police officers, and what are the possible legal implications from this incident? Here to discuss it all, we have attorney Matt Hoffmann with Battle-Born Injury Lawyers. And Matt, thank you so much as always for joining us. But let's go ahead and start with the actual incident itself. What does this video show you from a legal perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the video in and of itself is pretty disturbing. And I'm saying that from a legal perspective. You know, you've got a student who's 14 years old, who's standing in close proximity to an officer. The student has his phone out. He's recording an incident of the officer placing another student in handcuffs, it appears. The officer then tells him, you know, to back away and threatens him, saying something like, "You want to be next." The student doesn't back away to the satisfaction of the officer. And it looks like the officer then tries to swat away the phone and then violently grabs the child, throws him to the ground, puts a knee on his back, and holds him. And so from the first glance, it doesn't look good. It just doesn't look like a reasonable use of force from the circumstances that we see in the video. Now, that being said, officers do have a right to, to try to restrain a suspect if they believe they pose a threat of harm to either the officer or the public. But what's shown in the video, it's just hard to understand what that level of harm or that threat could have been. So I struggle to see this as anything more than just what appears to be excessive force.
Okay, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but when could force like this actually be justified? And you've already said that in this case, you're just not seeing it, but when could it actually be something the officer can say, okay, we had to use that level of force?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the reason that the officers were there. It was suspicions of a firearm on the school campus. That's obviously a huge high alert situation. I think just yesterday, I saw it reported that something like 3 handguns were confiscated at schools across the valley. So the presence of a firearm is about the highest level you can get. That is an absolute threat to the safety of the officer, to the safety of the children, and the officers have to do what they must to restrain a suspect if they believe they have a firearm. But in this case, and I'll give the police the benefit of the doubt here, we don't have the video or if there is body cam of what led up to this. So I don't want to completely bash them on this. But if the student was suspected of having a firearm, I don't think an officer would let him just stand there and say, you're next, or I'll get to you in a minute. The student's just standing there mere feet away from the officer with his phone out recording, which he has every right to do. You're out in public. You can record anything out in public. So you can have circumstances where this kind of force is reasonable, especially if there's a firearm involved. But in this case, I'm struggling to see that was the circumstance.
Okay, so where do you see things going as far as any legal action? We do know that the NAACP and some other groups have called for this officer to be fired. What else could we see here?
I'd be surprised if the family doesn't already have representation for a civil lawsuit. I would imagine that those attorneys have already reached out to Clark County School District. I think, on the personnel side with the officer, I think there's certainly the possibility of discipline, maybe even termination. But again, we need to find out all of the evidence here as far as what led up to this incident before making that determination. But I guarantee that's going to be looked at hard. And I would not be surprised if the officer is disciplined, suspended, or even fired.
All right, right now he's just been reassigned. But thank you so much, Matt, for joining us as always. We'll see you next week.